Good afternoon. This is Doug Bruhnke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, and I'm with Igor Novikov, who is an advisor, futurist, a transformational leader. He's the former advisor to President Zelensky. He's an ambassador at Singularity University. He's a father, he's a husband, and he's a regular on MSNBC's Deadline White House. He's also available for us today to talk about what's going on in Ukraine and what we should know about it and how we can help. First of all, Igor, thank you for taking the time. It's a busy time. It has been for quite a while. How are you and your family doing?
Well, Doug, thank you for inviting me. You're doing an invaluable service for my country, and I'll explain why. My family's fine. Everyone is safe. Obviously, psychologically, it being, year two of the war, it's taking its toll somewhat. So, the amount of people, in the near vicinity of your family with PTSD and, certain mental health issues is obviously increasing. Not exponentially yet, but I think this is where we had it. But at the same time, people have adapted. So I had a friend, a prominent American businessman, visit Kiev for 3 days last week, and he was completely shocked. So he basically said that, on one hand, I do understand, the seriousness of the situation. There's a major war, the biggest war in the world at the moment, happening like literally, a few hundred kilometers away from where we are. But on the other hand, I'm shocked and pleasantly surprised at how normal people seem, how normally they behave, and that the vibe of the city, the vibe of Kiev hasn't changed. And to be honest, that kind of element of cognitive dissonance between, the ultimate evil and the ultimate pain and the normalcy of it, I think that's the description of where we're at. And, I think same goes for my family. The reason I said you're doing an invaluable service for us is because obviously, it being year two of the war, people's attention span towards Ukraine is dissipating somewhat. And as I said, in the first few days of the war, this war can potentially be victorious to Ukraine, and this war is winnable if we are remembered. So the moment our partners, our allies look the other way, life is going to get exponentially more difficult for us. And I thank you for this opportunity to actually be able to speak to the Global Chamber and to remind all of you that, Ukraine is still fighting, Ukraine is still there.
What is going on there on the ground that we should know about, and how it best help?
I would say that in terms of the situation in the war at the moment, it's a transitional period. So obviously, summer was all about Ukraine's counteroffensive. That wasn't as successful as expected because of the delays of weapons deliveries to Ukraine and everything. Russia effectively had 9 months to dig in, and they've thrown everything they had at trying to make sure that Ukraine doesn't regain its territory. That's on one hand. Why I'm saying it's a transitional period, because Ukraine is starting to get results from the counteroffensive and is planning to continue. At the same time, Russia is gearing up and waiting for the cold weather to have another go at our critical infrastructure. So at the moment, Kiev hasn't been attacked for quite a while. So I would say for at least a month, if not more. But at the same time, we fully understand that as soon as it gets colder, the strikes will resume, and Russia has been saving its missiles and kind of trying to build a pile large enough to penetrate our defenses and make sure that this winter is even worse than the last one. So obviously the help that we need is with weaponry, mainly and first and foremost air defense, munitions and air defense systems, because it's pretty obvious Russia's not going to stop there, and their goal is to make sure life is miserable for Ukrainian civilians first and foremost, and that it gets cold and dark in Kiev. over the winter. So, we need help with that. In terms of the economy has adapted somewhat to the present reality, but at the same time, obviously it's on life support. So, I try and encourage as many business ventures, as many CSR projects as possible. So most of my time now is devoted to kind of holding the hands of different private equity funds and investment firms and just straight up businesses that want to do business in Ukraine to make sure that, first we find them the opportunity and that we mitigate the risks and make sure they come here and work with Ukrainians, because, obviously we need that life support for our economy to continue. And that's pretty much the second element of the help. But third and probably most important one is the one I've already mentioned. We need to make sure that Ukraine is remembered. We need to make sure that, the political spectrum in the US remembers Ukraine, that the news mention Ukraine at least every once in a while. Because I can tell you the story, I was completely shocked. As you know, I'm friends with many prominent Western journalists and editors at different news media organizations. And one friend of mine who's an editor-in-chief of a major American publication. So he told me this, off the record and on a very friendly basis. He told me, and just a small disclaimer, he's known for his pragmatism that borders with cynicism. So we're still friends and he's a great guy. So he told me, do you realize with what's happening in Israel, you have a competing conflict that will basically compete with Ukraine for resources, for attention, and for everything. And on one hand, he's absolutely right. On the other hand, neither of these wars can be lost, because, it's a hybrid world war that's going on in effect now between, the authoritarian axis of evil and the democratic world. And, if we can't decide, or if we can't fight two wars at once, we're going to lose the world war. And, therefore, a word and heartfelt sympathies and support from me and from my family and from the people of Ukraine goes first and foremost to the people of Israel. We know exactly what you're going through. You're facing the ultimate evil of terrorists, and those terrorists should be defeated at any cost. So that's kind of our position. And we're in the same position because we're fighting the ultimate evil as well. In fact, some of the terrorists that are attacking our country, for example, Wagner mercenaries, were behind Hamas's training for the terrorist attack. So, it's all interrelated. And as I said, unfortunately, for those of you afraid of a third world war, it's already happening. It's a hybrid world war, but it's happening. And it's only growing in size and in temperature of the conflict. And one last thing I can tell you, as the world's main authority, as the world's most respected country, the United States need to remember that you as Americans, you bear responsibility for global security. That's the position the US is in right now. It might seem you're not fighting in this third world war just yet, the hybrid one, but you already are. And if you let certain radical elements within your political spectrum convince you by lying to you that it doesn't matter what happens in Ukraine, in Israel, in North Korea, and elsewhere, then basically you're going to have your Pearl Harbor, but you're going to lose that war without firing a single shot. So you have to remember that this is not only Ukraine's war. This is not only Israel's war. This is a war between good and evil. And you can't abstain from this conflict. You need to pick a side and pick it carefully.
The amount of misinformation and propaganda is really stunning, and I guess this is a view of the future that we need to wrestle. I will say the good news is that the vast majority of Americans that I speak with and recognize understand at least to some level, what's going on. We now have two clear examples, somewhat different in their scope and how they've developed, but fundamentally based in what you've described, good versus evil. So thank you.
I can give you one really quick example, and it's somewhat
Sure.
graphic. So if somebody wants to like not listen from this point onwards, but the most ridiculous disinformation narrative that I've heard over the last few weeks is this narrative that, you know, Hamas in Israel is basically a group of freedom fighters who are fighting for the good of their people. And, you know, we heard the same about, you know, certain mercenary groups in Ukraine, Russian mercenary groups fighting us. But let me tell you one thing, as a Ukrainian and as somebody who's fighting for freedom, you know, you can fight for your freedom if it's your freedom. You can kill for your freedom. But unlike Hamas and, you know, Wagner, the main difference is you don't rape for freedom. You don't kill children for fun. You don't loot for freedom. There is a difference between fighting for your freedom and being a terrorist and a thug. And that distinction, regardless of what propaganda is kind of aimed at you, you have to remember that you have to be fighting for your land, and you have to respect your enemy, and you have to understand that, you know, at the end of the day, regardless of how bad it gets, if you cease being a human being, even for one deed, for one second, you're no longer good, you're evil. And this is the war between good and evil.
At a horrible cost, this is an illustration for most people, are not just in the US, but around the world, of that struggle of good versus evil that humankind has been struggling with since our beginning. It's a hearkening back to darker days of World War II and before, where people need to step up. So thank you for hearkening us, making us more aware of the situation. Also, thank you for your courage and your leadership, and really appreciate you taking the time for the update today.
Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to seeing you in the future, at least until we win. Then it's your call.
Well, one of the real quick takeaways certainly is business and getting connected to business in Ukraine and supporting Ukrainian business people, and the Global Chamber is really good at that. And so I'll make sure that we get our head down and focus, certainly follow up with you and others on the ground there, so that we can not just get things going now, but as the war ends and Ukraine gets reestablished, we've got a fast track to recovery as well. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Take care.